Everyone. My name is Melissa. I did just want to let you know we will be getting started in about 5 minutes. You are currently entering into this session, Responsive Programming in Youth Employment with the YMCA of Greater Vancouver. I did want to let you know throughout the session, please make use of the chat, sharing your thoughts, comments, and reflections. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A area. We also in this session will be using the polls tab, so we will let you know when the polls are coming up. So we'll just hang tight for a few minutes as people start to enter the room, and I'll let you know when we'll get started. But again, if you're just joining us, you're in the session for Responsive Programming and Youth Employment with the YMCA of Greater Vancouver. Just a welcome to everyone joining us. We'll get started in a few moments. I see we have a few more people joining us. That's great. I just wanted to welcome those of you who are jumping in for the session on Responsive Programming in Youth Employment with the YMCA of Greater Vancouver. We have Christy Peterson and Catherine Rana here today. Throughout the session, I did want to remind you to please make use of the chat. You can share your thoughts, comments, and reflections. If you have any questions, please use the question and answer area. We'll also be using polls throughout the session, so please participate in those. You'll see those in the polls section to the right of your screen. As well, I do encourage you to share your thoughts on social media using the hashtag YMCA Youth-Led Solutions so we can celebrate everyone's participation in the summit today. So we'll be getting started in about 1 minute. I see we have lots of people slowly entering into the room from the plenary, which is awesome. We will get started in just a moment. Welcome. I see people participating, jumping in. That's great. I hope everyone enjoyed the sessions earlier today. All right. If everyone is good, we will get started, and I think we'll have some people jumping in slowly over the next few minutes, if that's all right with everyone. So I did want to formally welcome you all to the session on Responsive Programming in Youth Employment with the YMCA of Greater Vancouver. Here with us today is Christy Peterson and Catherine Rana. Like I had said earlier, please make use of the chat, of the question and answer area, as well as we will be using polls throughout the session. This session is going to go over employment program development and design. And I did want to introduce Christy Peterson to the group. Christy is a career practitioner who has specialized in working with youth for 15 years. In her role as the Director of Employment and Immigrant Services with the YMCA of Greater Vancouver, Christy sees her team's role as working with youth to define possibilities, create connections, and help them shape their own journeys, and to never limit the potential they see in themselves. Christy adopts a solution-focused, trauma-informed approach that celebrates diversity with a strong belief that anyone, given the right opportunities and support, can find a job they love. So I'd like to turn the session over to both Christy and Catherine to take it away. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Melissa. Oh, where did my notes go? All right, there we are. So I'm set up. So welcome everyone, and thanks so much for joining our session today. So as Melissa was saying, my name's Kirsty Peterson, and I'm the Director of Employment and Immigrant Services at the YMCA of Greater Vancouver in British Columbia, Canada. And I also represent the Canadian YMCA on the World YMCA's Community of Impact on Youth Employment and Entrepreneurship. So I studied criminology at Simon Fraser University and career development at Kwantlen Polytechnic University, and I've been working with youth for a while. I really love working with this demographic because of my own history. I was a single mom living on government assistance when I had the opportunity to participate in a training program that sent me back to school to learn how to find other people find work. It seems a bit ironic to me now because I literally had no idea what I was doing. And but one thing I knew is that I knew what it felt like to be part of the system and to be looked at like maybe I couldn't accomplish anything. And so I decided to give it a try, and it turned out that I was really good at it. So I'm really happy to be here today, and I'm joined by one of our youth employment managers, Catherine Rana. And so I'm going to turn it over to Catherine to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Rana, like Kirsty said, and I'm the manager of youth employment programs at the YMCA of Greater Vancouver. I'm new to the Y. I've been with the Y since April. My background is in nonprofit marketing and program management, and I've been working in nonprofit management in Vancouver for around 12 years now, specifically focusing on working with Indigenous youth and families. I am born and raised in Vancouver, and my family settled here from Italy in the 1950s. And I'm really glad to be with you today. So Kirsty and I would like to start today by acknowledging that we are coming to you from the traditional unceded territory of Indigenous peoples. I am personally grateful to be a guest on the land of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations. And I encourage you to reflect on the Indigenous potentially territory that you reside on. We have an especially heavy heart right now because of the recent discovery of the remains of 215 Indigenous children on the grounds of a former residential school in Kamloops, British Columbia. And this serves as a reminder to us of the ongoing trauma that Indigenous communities face. And we need to use this to inform our reconciliation work as service providers and as community members.
Thanks, Catherine. So I guess a little bit our YMCA. The YMCA of Greater Vancouver is committed to strengthening the foundations of community by helping children and families thrive, promoting healthy living, and fostering belonging and connection. And we've been around for over 134 years. In 2020, our Y contributed to food security by serving over 500,000 meals to children in childcare, providing 2,000 food hampers to temporary foreign workers. We supported over 3,000 participants in employment and immigrant services, and also 3,000 summer day camp participants. We supported over 258 participants, which is a really specific number, who live with anxiety in our Y Mind mindfulness program. And we also hosted an extreme cold weather shelter out of one of our facilities. We also ran 63 childcare centers, and 58 of those provided childcare to frontline workers dealing with COVID-19. We also moved very quickly, as many of you probably did, over to virtual programming in many of our service areas, and we've delivered thousands of hours of virtual programming over the past year. Our Y also delivers health, fitness, and aquatic programming, chronic disease management, and many other programs that support people in our communities. However, today's session will be focused on employment programs, and it's targeted towards young people and the YMCAs that are interested in working towards youth-led solutions to employment challenges in your regions. So we'll discuss what our team considers when we're designing these programs, with the hope that you can take some of these strategies into your own communities. And later we have an activity, so get ready to participate in an activity, and we'll try designing a program together as a group. All right, so on to the next slide. And over to Catherine.
Okay, so helping people find jobs is obviously not just as simple as writing a resume. We are working with whole people with full and complex lives. Helping people find jobs requires that we break down barriers, we build up their strengths, and we establish a foundation for long-term employment. So we think wherever you are in the world, you can design innovative and sustainable employment programming by considering 3 key factors. And those are funding sources, labor market context, and community needs. So now we'll take a look at each of those.
Oh, I think I've got us on the wrong screen here. There we go. All right. So the first thing we're going to look at is funding. So sourcing appropriate funding is obviously critical to program design. We recognize that funding sources vary dramatically across regions. One of our major funding sources is government, and so this typically for us is the Canadian government and the government of British Columbia. This funding is usually very targeted. When they put out proposals, the government knows exactly what sort of programs they want to fund. There's not a lot of variability there. So when this funding is an option for us, the strategy is usually just to figure out how we can deliver what we need to within the parameters of what the funder is looking for. The next funding source that we could look at is private companies. And so one of our programs right now is funded by a private company. And corporations donate money, which is great, but they also provide other types of support, such as in-kind donations like time, their expertise, supplies, and job opportunities to participants. So we involve companies in our programming through networking sessions. We run employer Q&A panels where participants get to meet with employers. We run work experience placements on the job, as well as having guest speakers and having employers participate in mock interviews with our participants. So they get to really connect. Another funding partner is nonprofit organizations. And so partnering with other service providers and nonprofits can do 2 things. One, it can strengthen our funding applications and show our connection to community. It also allows us to leverage the expertise of different agencies. So the YMCA does a lot of things, as we know, but we can't do everything. And so we rely on our partners to support our participants with the services that we don't provide. Community foundations and grants is another option. And these often also have focus areas that the funders would prefer to support. So some may be focused on environment or other things, but they're usually less restrictive than government funds. And so we have a little bit more room to be creative with the types of programs that we design. Professional associations and unions are member organizations that often also raise funds, or the members pay dues that often go towards community development projects. And we've seen, especially in the skilled trades world, unions and professional associations contributing to training schools and employment projects. Another option is fee for service, where the users of the project actually pay a fee, which contributes towards program funding. So there's lots of different ways that funders can contribute. So be creative. In-kind donations like time, job placements, expertise, volunteers are huge, and supplies also go a long way in helping our participants to achieve their employment goals. All right, here we are on the next slide. Okay, so let's also consider what. So what does the funder want to fund? So just like community agencies such as the YMCA, funders also have their own needs and their own agendas. And we need to consider how we achieve the funders' goals along with our own while we're achieving, or when we're designing the programs. So for example, are they interested in funding new programs, or are they only willing to support existing programs? Some funders, really want to do something new and innovative, while other funders want to make sure that whatever we're going to do is going to work. So they want us to have tried it first. Perhaps they're willing to fund the expansion of an existing program so that we can serve more participants or expand geographic regions. Of course, successful program design also requires you to create a realistic budget of your program costs. So some things to consider is, will your program require paid skilled staff, or can you deliver programming using volunteers? Or perhaps you can use a combination of the two. At the YMCA of Greater Vancouver, we engage skilled workers in a variety of ways to fill funding gaps, to ensure program delivery, and to engage members of our communities in meaningful ways. Of course, you'll also want to determine what it costs to rent a program space, or if your organization owns your site, what are your operating costs to use your site, things like telephone and electricity and photocopying. And also, what supplies will you need to run your program effectively? And will these be things that you'll have to buy, or will they be donated? Perhaps your funder will provide in-kind support, or perhaps you have a community partner who can provide some of these supplies. So when determining the cost of your program, it's important to make it scalable, which allows you to adapt the program as funding opportunities change, because they usually do, either for better or for worse. And we've seen this in the past year a lot. And so thinking about how many more participants could you serve if you were funded for additional staff, or how many participants could you accommodate if you expanded your program space? Having scalable options ready can make the most of sudden funding opportunities when they arise, but also can make sure that your programs don't disappear when your opportunities are reduced, which also sometimes happens. So let's move on to the next slide. And I will hand it over to Catherine.
So labor market context is our consideration number 2. But before we get too much into that, we wanted to try our hand at doing a couple of polls here. So first and foremost, we'd like to know a little bit about who's in the room before we talk about labor market context. So Melissa, if you could run poll 1, you'll see your options up on the screen, and we're just trying to find out what region our participants or our audience lives in.
Absolutely. So if you could, all the participants could just go over to the section. It says chat, polls, people, Q&A. If you could select poll, scroll down to the bottom, and you will see the question there of what region do you live in?
Okay, the majority looks like are coming from North America, but Asia also represented as well. So our next question for you all would be what the major industry is in the area where you live. So that's in the poll as well.
Looks like it might not be quite there yet. We might need to give Melissa just another second for that second poll. And it looks like we have 11 people who have voted in the first poll about where you live. So if there's more of you, please continue to vote. It is not too late.
Are we able to see those results now, Christy?
Yeah. Oh, so I can see the results. So we have 11 people from North America, which is 84%, and then we have 2 people from Asia, which is 15%. On our first poll.
Poll number 2, if you scroll up, asks what is the major industry where you live, and you'll see a list that says tourism, retail, technology, etc. Let's run that one. The results are coming in. Seems pretty spread for now. Retail's taking the lead. So it looks like a good number of people. Retail's one of the main industries, construction, and then a bit of a spread between technology, manufacturing, health, and education. Great. So the next poll number 3, is we'd like to know what the main source of transportation is in the area where you live, because all of these things obviously play a factor when we're designing programming. So that would be poll number 3. If you scroll up, options are car or personal vehicles, trains, transit, bicycle, and walking. Car and personal vehicles seems to be the majority, and a little bit of transit. I'm not sure where everyone else is from, but trains are not a big thing in Vancouver.
In northern BC, though, I used to work for the railroad, and there was a train that we delivered everything. Like, we would drop off all their mail and all of their supplies and their groceries every week. It was kind of cool. And there was a little dog that would run up and greet the train every time we showed up.
All right, and our last question under labor market context is that we'd like to know how you would describe where you live. So if you scroll up to poll number 4, you'll see the options are town, suburb, village, a city with medium density, or a metropolitan city with high density. Looks like medium density city and suburbs seem to be the leader, and a high density city as well. So all of these kinds of factors are things certainly to consider when we're talking about labor market context. And it also gives Kirsty and I a sense of who's in the room with us today. So when we get into our activity later, we'll understand the context that we're coming from. So thanks, everybody.
All right, so thanks everyone. So on the screen, you'll see some examples of different labor market realities. So we'll revisit these again in the second part of our presentation when we brainstorm a program design. But first, we'll tell you a little bit about where we live and the labor market context in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. So Vancouver and its surrounding cities, known as Greater Vancouver, has a very high cost of living. We're in the top 2 most expensive cities to live in Canada and continually rank amongst the 25 most expensive cities in the world. So as a result, rent is really high and rental housing is really hard to find. It's also very expensive to buy homes, and most people can't afford it. Many people can't afford it. So we have public transportation in Vancouver and its surrounding cities, which consists mostly of buses and the SkyTrain, which is an above ground subway. Many people drive cars to work, take transit, or a combination of both. While we have a density of jobs in downtown Vancouver, surrounding cities have fast developing downtowns as well. And so not everybody lives right in the city, and many people are spread across the region. 77% of new jobs in our area require some form of post-secondary training, and we currently have a 7% unemployment rate. Young people, followed by new immigrants, are the largest sources of new labor in our area. And healthcare, social services, and professional technical services are currently sectors with the most job opportunities. So staying informed of the realities of your area's labor market will allow you to design timely and successful employment programs. Recently, in the last few years, we've designed programs to address employment gaps in our province specific to the childcare sector. We've seen a huge need for a trained labor force to meet the demands of our growing population. And so we wanted to prepare job seekers for in-demand opportunities through our programs. And so that was one way that we did that. When building programs, understanding the needs of the local labor market will also allow you to more easily achieve employment outcomes, because when we focus on areas where we know that there are jobs, we ensure that our participants in our programs are successful. And so for instance, in the early childcare program that we're running, we know that there's jobs. And so it's very easy for participants to find work afterwards because all those jobs are there, which is different than if we were trying to train people to be, I don't know, astronauts or something. It's going to be much more difficult to get people employed at the end of an astronaut training program. So being strategic is important. So we realize that where we live may be very different from where you live. And so we'd like to invite 3 people from our workshop to come up to describe the labor market context where you live. So if you can click on the request to join button so that we can hear about what your labor market looks like. And hopefully Melissa can help us with the technical aspect of this because I'm not sure exactly how it works.
Absolutely, I will do my best to help. People are also welcome to participate in the chat as well.
So we would love to know about what your labor market context looks like. Any brave volunteers?
Oh, I see Vanessa here.
And then I just click on.
Hello.
Great.
Hi. I think that I'm in Rochester, New York, and I would say that our labor market is similar to what you described.
Great, awesome. Thanks, Vanessa. So what are the primary industries? Like if I was looking for a job, I was to come to you, I moved to New York and I need a job, what would you suggest I do?
Right now in Rochester, New York, you're going to have a fair amount of opportunity in your fast food, your retail style work. Truly, we do have some other larger businesses, but I don't know. It seems like it's in a lot of cities of our size that really a lot of frontline jobs are available and there aren't as many folks that are applying for them. So that's really what's happening right now. We seem to have more jobs than individuals trying to work in those jobs.
All right. Thanks, Vanessa. So that's a really interesting consideration when we're looking at, and I'll just let Vanessa go back off of the screen here. So that's a major consideration. So when we're looking at jobs in Rochester, one of the training programs that might be important is to try to help bridge people into those jobs or to help those jobs to accept people and, maybe young people who don't have a lot of work experience or don't know how to do those jobs or maybe think that they or don't know how to do interviewing or put together a resume. So that's really interesting. Is there anybody else who wants to share a little bit about their labor market? We've got Trina saying hi, who's also from Greater Vancouver. All right, if we don't have any more volunteers, we can just move on to the next slide.
Awesome. So our third consideration are community needs. So understanding the needs and histories of our community is our responsibility as service providers. I would say job seekers face additional barriers to becoming and staying employed, and this varies across communities. Program design should always take into account the needs of the communities we serve. After all, participants are experts in their own lives. And so that's why it's important that we build programs around and in consultation with our community and in consultation with past participants to ensure that we understand the unique challenges and strengths of our community. First and foremost, we absolutely acknowledge that the list of community needs that you see on your screen are not exhaustive, and that there are many more challenges that our community and your communities face. These are just some examples of the community needs we consider when we're designing programming at the YMCA of Greater Vancouver. So now Kirsty and I will go through a few of them and just talk about how they affect our program design and how we address them through our programs. So the first one is mental health. Mental health is a state of well-being, as you all know probably, in which an individual realizes their own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution in their community. So according to the World Health Organization, 20% of people who are working live with some sort of mental health concern. And of all persons with disabilities, those who experience serious mental illness face the highest degree of stigmatization in the workforce and the greatest barriers to employment. To link this to program design, we've observed an increase in the number of youth who disclose that they have anxiety and depression. And so this is a very real effect on their ability to find employment if proper accommodation isn't made, or if these youth don't feel safe at work. So while work has positive impacts on our mental health, we also know that negative work environments can accelerate mental health concerns. Because of this, our employment programs at the YMCA of Greater Vancouver can refer youth and even pay for youth to access low-cost counseling. We provide workshops on mindfulness. We connect youth with cultural supports. We can pay for prescriptions. And we also train youth on how to talk about their mental health with their employers.
I forgot to move the slide there. Sorry about that, Catherine. All right, so my next community need that I'm going to talk about is homelessness and housing insecurity. So our home environment plays a huge part in our success at work. And as we mentioned, our housing market is really expensive in Vancouver right now. And we work with a lot of youth who face extreme housing insecurity. And we've watched the anxiety that arises when youth don't have a fixed address to include on their resumes, or they don't have a safe place to prepare for their workday, or to shower, or to cook breakfast. If you don't have a safe place to rest after a day of work, your sleep is affected, which means that waking up at a specific time in the morning is affected. You know, simple things that we take for granted, such as having a plug in the wall to charge a cell phone, aren't always available, which means that people who are living in unstable housing are often much more difficult to get a hold of. And to an employer who's unaware of the situation, this could mean that a person presents as unreliable or unprofessional, when really there's just a big need going unmet. And so our programs provide things like rental assistance, utility assistance, referrals to housing support workers, to be able to help bridge this gap for young people who are accessing our programs to be able to secure employment a little bit easier.
So our next community need is income insecurity and poverty. So when a person's basic needs are met, much like Kirsty is saying, it's very difficult to focus on finding and maintaining employment. Our employment programs are able to offer emergency assistance to our participants. And so we can provide support for groceries, clothing, and we can pay for living allowances. So while the youth is participating in our programs, we're able to pay them a wage so that they're earning an income while participating in programming.
So another thing that pops up a lot is parenting responsibilities. So parenting responsibilities can affect the type of employment that a participant can consider. Parenting responsibilities also disproportionately affect women in our communities. So in Vancouver, as I mentioned, a lack of affordable childcare is one of the main reasons that women cannot enter the workforce or maintain employment. Women are overrepresented in part-time or precarious work. And this is in large part due to the lack of affordable childcare and having to juggle jobs around school or friends or families' work schedules when they can find people who can babysit. In many of our employment programs, we're able to cover childcare costs so our participants can join programming while ensuring that their children are taken care of, and also ensuring that they can focus on what they're doing. Because we find that when you have a child at home, and I know, as I said, I was a single parent trying to work at home for a while, not just over COVID either, but before that. And it can be really hard. You know, you've got kids that as soon as you're there, it doesn't matter how old they are, there's things that they want. And so ensuring that that our young people who have children are able to send their kids to a safe place is really important for them being able to focus and learn the things that they need to do to get into the labor market.
Addictions and substance use has an impact on our mental and physical health, and therefore has impacts on a person's ability to thrive at work. It's important to consider how substances, whether they're normalized substances or not normalized substances, have an impact on someone's performance. Our employment programs offer, as I said, counseling and cultural supports, can refer to detox or treatment for youth, offer prevention-based workshops on substance use, for youth who are either at risk of using substances or currently use substances.
All right. And then, of course, when you're looking for quality employment, local work experience matters a lot in many places. And newcomers especially may struggle to be competitive in their new job market. So our programs also offer workshops on cross-cultural communication, Canadian workplace culture, and can refer participants to have their credentials assessed.
Off of that a little bit, language barriers are also a community need that we need to address. So the ability to communicate effectively is critical at most jobs. So our programs can refer participants to conversation clubs, further language training if they need it, and translation services as needed.
All right, and lack of structure and technology. So job seekers need to be able to safely and affordably access employment and programs. And that's another thing that we try to help with. So our programs offer transit tickets, and we can also offer gas reimbursement for our participants who have vehicles. I've heard of other local programs getting even more creative and doing things like offering bicycles to participants, or being able to provide outreach services, which is something that we kind of do sometimes, are able to actually go out in the community and meet with participants who can't get to our sites. We've also found, and this is something we're finding even more right now with the reliance on technology, is that participants may also lack things like internet, computers, phones, and other technology that we often need at our jobs, or that we need for a job search. So our employment programs are able to cover the cost of these items for participants so that they don't miss out on opportunities and are able to participate, are able to receive phone calls from potential employers, are able to send out resumes and look for jobs online, and all those other things that they need to do.
And our last community need for today is racism and systemic barriers. Many of the challenges Christy and I have just outlined disproportionately affect those who face systemic discrimination. For example, the ongoing impacts of colonization in Canada means that many people, specifically Indigenous communities, experience intergenerational trauma and a real lack of safety when accessing services, including employment programming. So we need to employ diverse staff at our programs to make sure that our participants feel reflected and represented in our programming. And we also need to ensure that we use our access as service providers to advocate for change at a systemic level. So to summarize, I guess, our presentation thus far, context is everything. So at RY, we work hard to make sure that our programs take into account the needs of our funders, the labor market context, and most importantly, our community of participants.
So did we want to, let's see if there's any more, anything to add from the audience. What are the needs in your communities? If you can click on request to join, and you can give us some ideas of, did we miss anything? Is there anything that's going on in your communities that we didn't think about? Or in the chat, that works too.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
We can. Thank you for joining us. What did we miss?
I jumped on a little late, but for me, I would say like not only access to entry level positions, but maybe some training and like opportunities for training, because I find that like if you don't have like a GED, or if you don't have a certain kind of education, etc., like you have to pay to be able to obtain that skill. And I think it would be really awesome for people to have access to, like coding courses at like, the bare minimum level, or maybe just some kind of other, maybe like a stipend so that they can attend a trade school or something like that. I think like just kind of bridging that gap, because I think it's expected of people to like pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But if you don't have the financial means to do that, or you don't know where to look, or you don't have a career counselor, etc., like, if you've gone to university, you have access to that as an alum. You have access to all these resources. But if you haven't gone to university, or you dropped out of high school, you don't really know where to turn. So
absolutely. And that's a really good point. And that is actually something that we do provide and forgot to add. But you're absolutely right. And I think the analogy that I would use is like we expect people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, but a lot of our young people don't even have boots. So what are they going to do? So you're absolutely right. And thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to contribute? Any other needs that we've maybe missed?
definitely got some agreement with what's been shared in the chat so far.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's move on then to our next section here. So we're going to design an employment program. So what we need is 5 volunteers to form our panel of designers. And so we'd like you to work together as a group to brainstorm an exciting new program. So we'll help you through the process. So anybody who'd like to volunteer, please click on the join button or request to join button, and we will bring you up on the screen.
I'm so scared.
All right, welcome back. Okay, so we need a few more. We're hoping for 5, but if we can get even a few more people to help join our little panel here. I know we've got some excellent program designers out there that are super excited. All right, so if you want to volunteer, please click on your join or request to join button. We have Alda, I think, who wants to volunteer. So that's excellent. If you just hit request to join. Oh, I don't know how to join you. Melissa, do you know how to join people who haven't hit request yet?
Let me see for you, Christy. A moment here.
Thank you.
Actually, the button on my screen says ask to share audio and video. It doesn't say join. So if you're looking for that, it was in the top right-hand corner of the display.
Oh, thank you so much. How do I say your name?
Elijah. Think of like allegiance, hard J,
okay.
Elijah.
Perfect. Elijah, thank you. Oh, here we go. We have Alda and we have Charlotte. Anyone else who wants to join? Okay, well, I guess we can get started on our panel. And if anybody else wants to join in, then just hit what button was it? The request to share screen?
Share audio and video.
Request to share audio and video. Perfect.
Like
okay. So our panel of 3 right now. So the first thing that I would like you to do is if you can just introduce yourselves. And so I will start with Elijah.
Hi, I'm Elijah.
And if you can just tell us, what are the questions that I have here? So if you can give us your name, where you're from, and just maybe just a little bit about you.
Okay, hi, I'm Elijah. My pronouns are she, her. I'm from Houston, Texas, and I currently am at work. I work for the Y. I do programming for civic engagement for youth. And so this is one of our next projects and interests for our youth, and also for myself. I'm 26, so I think it's really important for me to be a part of the conversation in kind of like trying to carve out what my future gets to look like, or what it gets to look like for my peers too.
Cool. Thanks so much. Alda?
Hi, so I'm Alda, and I'm from Kosovo. I'm second, and I go to high school.
Great, Ida. Thank you, Ida. And Charlotte.
Hey everyone. I don't know why my video is not working. Every time I try to turn it on, it goes weird, so I apologize. But yeah, my name is Charlotte. I use she, her pronouns. I am in Ontario, Canada, and I work for the Y as well here, the Y of Three Rivers, as a program the coordinator for our teenage parenting program, and I'm starting to do some youth programming as well, and I'm really excited.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining our panel. So the 3 of you are going to have an opportunity to design a program. So we will just let you work together. So what is the program? What program do you want to design? Think about things that will be relevant for all 3 of your communities. So that'll be interesting because you're coming from very different places. So if you can just maybe give us a sense for what your priority areas are, each of you, and we'll just sort of let you speak. So just unmute yourselves and speak. I don't want to interrupt your creative process by telling you what to say and when to say it. But what would you do? What would your program look like?
From you guys first. I feel like I've been speaking a lot, so I'll listen for a little.
No problem. I mean, I think there's a lot missing in my community personally, but sort of where to start. I'm just sort of looking back at the polls, like those areas. Mental health has definitely come to the forefront, especially throughout this pandemic. And I think, make the assumption that is pretty high on other folks' like radar in their communities as well. That's definitely been something that's really sparked in my community. I'm not sure about you, Alda.
Also affected every teenager here. Like I talked pandemic, and we all were like depressed and having bad thoughts, and we were having in our families, and it was really hard time for us too. And that impacted us.
Something that came up for me as I was looking through the polls, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Charlotte, is that I applied to several jobs after graduating, and I have like an Excel sheet with all of them in there. And I think what was frustrating is I felt like I was, qualified for these positions, but a lot of people say things, like, oh, it's networking, it's who you know. And so I wonder what it would be like to have a program that introduces young folks to industry level professionals, et cetera, and gets us more connected with people. And I think that there are lots of people who are in positions of power or, like in senior level positions that want to see new faces and want to interact with new people. But, that's kind of by chance. So it'd be interesting, I think, to have kind of like a mentorship network or something like that.
My camera was on, so you could see me smiling and nodding, agreeing with you, because I completely agree. And I didn't mean to, if I came across as sort of siloing and just mental health, I wasn't. But no, I think that's an amazing idea, because I completely agree. I was in the same position coming out of school. They propose as, when you're done in school, you should have all these opportunities. And okay, you've completed a degree, or even if you don't, things should be there, and they're not. Or even if you are qualified, for some reason, they're still not. So I think that's would be beneficial for both sides of that. So for the youth or the folks learning from that, and then also those corporations or those businesses reaching back out to their community and getting to know the community and folks who would possibly work with them and what those people need. So I think that's a really good idea.
Are all going with this, and I think especially as young people, we're often told like, you should be networking, you should be connecting. What does that even mean when you're young, right? That's really hard to do. And so add on to the fact that often young people, I feel like, lack access to professional mentors. Add on to that, let's say you do experience anxiety and depression, and mental health is a concern in your community, like you've said it is in yours. Add that on to the fact that you have to be networking. Think of how challenging and scary that would be for a young person to think that they need to be making all these connections for their future, plus are living with a fair amount of anxiety and depression. So I think you're all on the right track when you're looking at employment and community needs and how they combine.
Absolutely. So we've got about 10 minutes left, it looks like, in our presentation. So let's move to the next part of our panel discussion. So breaking news, there's been a grant opportunity that we've just made up just now. And it's a community grant. It's for 1 year. Well, it could be 1 year. It's $150,000 Canadian. We've done a bunch of conversions for anybody else who's not familiar with Canadian dollars. And so what we want to do is let's say it's about a year grant, but we want to look at the idea that you have. So you're looking at a mentoring type of a program, and what would we do? Oh, okay. We have a poll that we're going to run. Actually, I'll let Catherine do that part.
Screen in polls. Let me just scroll over to it. We need to quickly pick our community need that our employment program is going to consider. So we've talked a little bit about mental health, but we'll open it up to the group. If you could please complete the poll that says, what community need does our employment program need to consider? So I'll give you all a second to complete that one. waiting for the results.
So it looks like mental health is leading the polls here, followed by poverty and income insecurity and new immigrants. So I guess mental health is our primary, but if we wanted to include things about poverty and new immigrants, I think that would be fair game to do so. And let's open up the last poll around, where's labor market context? Yeah, so what labor market context does our employment program need to consider? So if you could fill out that poll as well. So it looks like we've got a healthcare essential worker shortage, a need for entry-level labor are leading the pack. They are tied. They are totally tied. So if we can get, need for entry-level labor is coming into the lead.
Takes the lead.
Yeah. I feel like I'm at a horse race here. Yeah, so need for entry-level labor. So we have a community grant. We have $150,000 Canadian. There's a need for entry-level labor. There's an essential worker shortage. We've got issues with mental health. We've got lots of new immigrants, and poverty and income insecurity is one of the other issues of the area. Okay, so what would our panelists do with this money, with this project?
First thing, we need people. So we need either organizations or the business side of things, so reaching out to those folks, and then also the youth or the people that we're trying to have benefit from this program, because without people, we can't really run the program. So to sort of start there, and we need a space to do that, which might also require some funds. I know spacing is a big issue for trying to run programs here. So I think that would be a solid place to start.
I'd be interested to know how other like community or like, for example, like a trade school, if they were willing to like provide training, or if someone were wanting, if like there were an organization in the community that wanted to provide like some form of resources, and maybe they would take it at a discounted rate, etc., so they could serve a larger part of the community, and kind of create in a sense create a program that can serve the community, but that we could pay them at a discounted rate for, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you. Ida, do you have any ideas or any thoughts?
I don't know, I guess there's some right at all.
We're getting a bit of feedback there from Ida. Thank you, though. So I think that's all really interesting, some of the ideas that you've had, and I really want to highlight. And we're gonna about to go into our Q&A session, because our sessions, we're running out of time. We've had so much great participation, but this is really how we do this. You know, when these opportunities come up in Greater Vancouver, we all sit in a room and we all just throw all of our ideas out at the wall and we write them all down. And then we go, oh yeah, that's never going to work. Oh, that'll never work. Oh, I love that idea. And we just build upon each other's ideas. And that's really, I think, a big part of it is just throwing everything out on the table. What do we want to accomplish? What do we need to accomplish? Who also wants to accomplish those same things? And I love what you said about who else is doing these things, who else might want to work with us, because that's a really big part of designing programs. So thank you so much to our panelists, and we really appreciate your support and all of your ideas. And so now we're going to just move into a quick Q&A. We have about 4 minutes, and we have a question right now in the Q&A. And if anybody else has any other questions, please just pop them into the Q&A on the right-hand side. So our first question is, how do you work around funding requirements like target numbers and accessibilities for youth who are facing intersectional barriers. Do you want to take a stab at this one, Catherine, or I feel like I've been talking for a while?
How do we work around funding requirements who are facing intersect? So the majority of the employment programs that Christy and I have been talking about at the Y are specifically designed to work with youth who face barriers. So I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question fully. In our funding contracts that we have, we make sure we incorporate our ability to work with youth who face different barriers. And so I think what that looks like for us is that looks like advocating not just for resources to provide the supports that we talked about when we were talking about community needs, but also to allow us the time to work with youth who do face barriers. So the timeline of getting a job might be a little bit longer for someone who's facing barriers. So we make sure that we work the time that we need to help a participant become successful. We work that into the contract. I'm not sure if I'm answering that question as appropriate for Anonymous. I'm not sure if you wanted to ask again or if I've misunderstood. Just pop it in the Q&A.
Yeah, if you have any, if you want to clarify a little bit, if we've sort of missed the mark. I think some of the other things that we think about is one of the most important things in our program is to treat each person as an individual and to make sure that all of the work that we're doing with them really revolves around what their needs are. We also look at designing our programs when we're looking at specific barrier groups. And so we run a program, for instance, that's specifically targeted towards youth whose primary barrier is mental health. That said, that's never the only thing, right? So there's mental health, but then some people might be dealing with poverty or substance use or many other things. And so we designed the program, though, specifically to deal with those different barriers. And so we make the start times a little bit more flexible so that they won't get kicked out if they don't show up. We give them, extra time on Fridays so that they can catch up if they've missed anything. We, instead of making sure that they go straight into work, we have a volunteer option, and so they can volunteer for 12 weeks, which meets the outcomes of our funder, because what they want is for them to be in a work placement, whether it's paid or unpaid, but it allows them to transition. And so looking at those creative solutions is figuring out what is the outcome that the funder wants to see. Okay, it wants to see employment. Does it have to be paid or could it be unpaid? Well, if it could be unpaid, then great. Volunteering is an option. We always need volunteers. If it has to be paid, well, then who are our partners that can help us accomplish that? And so we work with thrift stores and we work with nonprofit organizations that, are looking for people, or recycling depots that are always looking for people that can take large numbers of our participants to be able to do jobs that may be different, right? Like, somebody may not be comfortable working with the public. And so we need to make sure that all of our connections on the other end suit that as well. So we have a question. It looks like we're running out of time. But yeah, please do reach out to us for anybody who has any other questions. Our email addresses are on the screen, so feel free to reach out. We'd love to answer your questions. We would love to hear from you. And thank you, everybody, so much for attending today.
Thank you, everyone.
I just wanted to take a moment. Christy and Catherine, thank you so much for all the information you shared. I know I learned a ton about your programs, and I'm very grateful to have you both here. So on behalf of the audience, thank you very much. And I know there were some questions about getting access to information and presentation. So I do encourage those participating to email Christy and Catherine as well. But thank you very much for your time today. And for those participating in the session, if you were looking to join any of our other breakout sessions that will be starting in about 5 minutes, there's a session on paving your way through Earn and Learn programs, another session on young people working towards climate-friendly, energy-efficient solutions and livelihood, or there's HP Life's revolutionary free-to-access skill-based learning platform. And all of those breakout sessions will start in about 5 minutes. So thank you again, Christy and Catherine, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day today.